Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
After the attack on Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941, President Roosevelt declared war on Japan and Germany, and World War II was underway. Few people know that shortly after that declaration of war, the small town of McGregor would be the home of one of 4 bomb ordnance plants in the United States, supplying millions of bombs to our fighting men and women overseas. This booklet, part of the history collection of the Waco Library, contains complete details of how the 18,000-acre National Gypsum Company facility in McGregor was converted into the Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant. This documentary will explore the details of this report and how this massive facility was built and staffed with over 5,000 workers within our 8-month period. The Blue Bonnet story began in 1941 with the National Gypsum Company of Buffalo, New York. After the tragedy of Pearl Harbor, manufacturers and industrial leaders from all over the nation came forward to offer their buildings, services, materials, and employees to aid the war effort. M.H. Baker, the president of National Gypsum Corporation, wired the Secretary of War offering the services of the employees and all of the National Gypsum facilities. On February the 9th, 1942, Mr. Baker and his associates met in Washington, D.C. with members of the U.S. Ordinance Department and signed the contract to design, build, and operate the Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant to be located in McGregor, Texas. Blue Bonnet was one of 4 bomb plants in operation during World War II. The other 3 were the Nebraska Ordnance Plant, operated by Firestone, the Cornhusker Plant by Quaker Oats, and the Pantex Plant operated by Certainty Products. Less than a month later, on March the 7th, National Gypsum executives arrived in Waco and began working with Army engineers to begin the design and construction from offices established at the Armory at 12th and Washington, and later at Waco's old library at 12th and Austin. While the Army Corps of Engineers handled all aspects of plant construction, the key players, many of whom were gypsum employees, worked out production strategies. Their goal would be getting the production as soon as possible to supply much-needed ammunition to our armed forces. On October 16, 1942, barely 8 months after Mr. Baker signed the contract, the Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant officially went into production, a process that would normally have taken at least 2 years to establish. During construction and equipment layout, the Special Employment Office was opened in Waco at 1023 Austin Avenue to begin the process of hiring the more than 5,000 additional people needed for production. The employment team recruited and processed new hires and helped with insurance, lodging, food, selective service, deferment for many people, transportation, and more. With tire and gasoline rationing in effect and automobiles wearing out, an employee transportation section was organized to get riders and drivers together. A report in July 1944 showed that almost 1,100 cars and trucks were making daily trips to the plant carrying passengers. The first few months at Blue Bonnet were hectic as thousands of employees tried to settle into their new headquarters and new jobs. Many had never been in the South before and had to be acclimated to the weather as well, as their culture in the Blue Bonnet plant virtually became its own city. The Employee Service Group, which provided clothes, shoes, housing, doctors, counselors, and recreation, served meals at lunch stands and cafeteria with the help of Wyatt Company of Dallas. In addition to barracks and trailer camps, on-site dormitory rooms were available at 60 cents a night or $3 a week. A recreation department promoted bowling leagues, softball teams, golf tournaments, and dances to give employees a much-needed break from their hard work. Female counselors were available for workers to talk to during each shift for their psychological well-being, and an on-site hospital provided 9 physicians at various times. There was even a plant protection division, which included guard, fire, and investigation sections. At its peak, the fire department boasted 179 personnel, 3 fire stations, and 6 fire trucks. A fire alarm telephone reporting system was installed with 100 fire phones located throughout the huge 18,000-acre plant. The Guard Department, responsible for worker safety as well as national security, played the role of both police and military. At one time, the Guard force rose to 575 people who were responsible for keeping peace on the grounds and keeping unauthorized persons out. The department was outfitted with 18 cars equipped with two-way radio units. When the primary products being constructed are highly explosive bombs, the Safety Department educated workers in safe practices through posters, news articles, safety meetings, and more. Rescue squads were formed in all buildings on all shifts, on all lines, to function in case of a disaster. In spite of handling extremely volatile products, the plant had only a few minor incidents, thanks to the plant protection team. The Blue Bonnet Plant was truly its own city, and its leaders did everything they could to protect and provide for and serve its residents while serving their country. The majority of incoming workers knew very little about ammunition or loading bombs, so a training school for production sectors was crucial. Employees were tested at the end of the class and were closely supervised as they began their specialized jobs on one of the 6 lines of production. Each line or area included several buildings for separate tasks. Because of hazards involved in operation with explosives, the various buildings on the bomb load line had to be spaced at considerable distances and were protected from each other by large earth barricades. The amount of explosives and the number of people allowed in each building were based on these distances and the amount of barricade protection. The distance from the receiving building to the end of the shipping building was as much as 3/4 of a mile. 3 different types of bombs were made at Blue Bonnet: the semi-armored piercing bomb, used to pierce the armored deck of a ship, the general-purpose bomb, used for demolition, and the fragmentation bomb, that was quite different than the other 2. It was made with sharp steel fragments which would cause a terrible jagged wound. The 6 lines or areas of assembly at the Ordnance Plant included lines 1, 2, 3, and 4, plus the booster line and the nitrate plant. Lines 1 through 4 each operated in a similar fashion with many of the same buildings and equipment. Line 1 was the first to be activated and began production October the 10th, 1942. There are several steps to the bomb loading process. First, bombs were received in boxcars at a receiving building where they were unloaded and inspected. After the shipping bands were removed, the bodies were taken to the paint building, placed on fart carriers which traveled on a rolling conveyor into the paint booth and sprayed by a hand-operated spray gun. Then they were pushed into a hot air oven to dry. Next, the bomb bodies went to the nose pour building, where nose pads of rosin, wax, and petroleum were placed into the nose cone of the bomb along with explosives, which was a mixture of TNT and ammonia nitrate. Explosive production took place in the screen building room and the melt pour building. In the screen building, the materials were cleared of lumps and debris on a giant shaking screen and then placed in boxes to be transported to the melt pour building. There, steam-heated units melted the TNT and nitrate to the proper consistency. Giant kettles melted the filler, which would mix with the explosives to be poured into the bomb bodies. After the nose pour process, the bombs went to the cooling building to let the mixture set. When auxiliary boosters were used in the bombs, cavities for them were made while the bombs cooled. Then in the tail pour building, tail plates were assembled to the bombs, more explosives were added, and the wax tail pad was moved into place. After cleaning, gauging, stenciling, and inspection, the completed bombs went to the shipping building where they were loaded into rail cars for shipment. Line 2 buildings were completed and began production by November the 28th. Originally, 1,000-pound SAP bombs were loaded on Line 2 until the switch to 100-pound general-purpose bombs, which were packed with fins in wooden boxes. Line 3 was activated on December the 18th and focused primarily on the production of 100-pound GP bombs. Line 3 shipped its first ones out on January the 19th, 1943. A fourth line, with twice the capacity of the existing lines, began construction during the fall of 1944. And by February of 1945, production of 500-pound GP bombs loaded with triethanol had started. The booster line, activated on October 15, 1942, produced M102 boosters just 5 days a week until August of 43, when the 6-day work week was adopted. Only the Blue Bonnet workers and residents of the area knew the enormity of the operation of the McGregor plant. The Operations Department handled everything from purchasing, receiving, storing, and issuing all the components for production. During the first quarter of 1943, 2,173 rail cars of freight were handled in and out of the plant, while in the second quarter of 1945, the volume ran up to an impressive 8,157 rail cars. Through July of 1945, the number of cars handled during the plant's operation was 23,464 inbound and 20,471 outbound freight cars. Also illustrating the enormity of the operation, the number of employees peaked the same year at a whopping 5,732. The Operations Department had a huge supply of rolling stock on hand at the time production stopped. The Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant contributed significantly to the war effort through the efficient, safe production of a huge number of bombs that would play a role in the Allied victory. The plant earned the Army and Navy E Award and 2-star citations for its excellence. From October 16, 1942, when Line 1 opened for production, until August 14, 1945, when bomb loading ceased, over 13,800,000 bombs and boosters were built and shipped out of the Blue Bonnet Plant in McGregor. When the war ended, so did production, and steps were immediately taken to notify vendors of purchase orders and contract cancellations. Purchase orders at the time were approximately $1.5 million, and Blue Bonnet was recognized as having the largest number of purchase orders canceled without any cost to the government. Another responsibility for Blue Bonnet leaders was the major task of decontaminating the plant. The plant was recognized by the U.S. Decontamination Board for excellence in quality decontamination work performed. By November the 30th, the custody, responsibility, and accountability of the entire plant was turned over to the Ordnance Department, who then turned it over to the U.S. Corps of Engineers. Since its closing, many industries have taken up residence on the old Blue Bonnet site, most of which manufacture similar type products that were first made by Blue Bonnet. Some of the land was given to Texas A&M University for the development of an experimental farm and research center. Not many Central Texans are aware that the peaceful town of McGregor was once home to the vast bomb manufacturing plant during World War II that I've described to you today. The Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant was a home away from home for thousands of workers from across the country and from all walks of life who came together to build munitions with expert care, all to help our boys overseas win the war. The selflessness and hard work of these thousands who called McGregor, Texas home for 3 years should never be forgotten. The Blue Bonnet Ordnance Plant deserves its place in history as a monument to the spectacular feats that can be accomplished when Americans come together for the good of their country.